Hello, I'm Paddy Delaney, and welcome to Integrated Infrastructure, a podcast dedicated to bringing you news and views from industry leaders involved in the development, design, construction and management of the many built forms that make up Australia's integrated infrastructure. This is episode 7 of Integrated Infrastructure, and this week we're talking to Garth Lamb, Chief Development Officer of Re.Group, and National President and Chair of Waste Management and Resource Recovery Association of Australia. I'm personally fascinated by the changing landscape in waste and resources, and from a business point of view, the role that waste-to-energy has to play in that. Garth paints a picture for us of where the waste and resources industry was post-war, how that moved to a disposable society, and how we're now going back to the ideals of our grandparents' generation with a much greater focus on reusing and recycling material. We talk about the intrinsic value in waste, and of the $15 billion industry's role in keeping our society safe, and the future development of the industry that will provide opportunities, innovation and jobs. One of which is the energy from waste plant Re.Group is currently developing with Energy Australia at Mount Piper. There's much more in this week's episode, so I do hope you enjoy it. If you do, please like, share, subscribe and comment. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Garth. Garth, welcome to Integrated Infrastructure. Thanks ever so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Patrick.
That's great. Just to put it into context, our connection comes from me being lucky enough to get onto your Coffs Harbour group webinars in the last few weeks around resources and waste management, and also picking up your involvement in the waste-to-energy industry. It's great to have you on. But maybe you could introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you do and who you work with and who you represent, and let our viewers find out a little bit about you.
Yeah, great. So my name's Garth Lamb. I'm the Chief Development Officer for Re.Group. Re.Group's an Australian company. We specialise in resource recovery. So we don't do the collection side of the waste market. We don't do the landfill side, but we are involved in almost all aspects of the processing and the resource recovery. So whether that's yellow bin, we run facilities that separate those materials and sell them. In the green bin, we run enclosed composting facilities to make good compost materials out of food and garden organics. And as you mentioned, one of the more interesting projects we're developing at the moment is in the energy from waste space, which is jointly delivering with Energy Australia up at the Mount Piper Power Station near Lithgow.
Yeah, fantastic. And you're also National Chair and President of Waste Management and Resource Recovery Association of Australia. Yeah,
that's right. So it's a great industry. It's an industry that I love being part of, and I do try and make time to I guess contribute more than just the day job, but try and make sure that I can contribute what I can to the rest of the industry, because we've got a lot to do and we all need to work together. So it's a great forum to do that through.
Brilliant, and it really does strike me, having been on your seminars in the last few weeks, that there really is a cohesive sort of drive behind the industry to work together and achieve results, especially now with COVID and everything.
Yeah, I think in the last few years it's certainly come to the fore. For a long time our whole sector was sort of out of sight, out of mind. People wheeled their bins out on bin night and didn't really think about what happened next and the complexity of it. Fundamentally, we're victims of our own success because the system works pretty well in Australia. People don't have to worry too much about what happens next. But the reality is that it's a very complex task. There's not many other sectors where you have to visit every household at least once a week, usually a couple of times a week, to pick up different bins. You have to safely transport that material. You have to process it. You have to dispose it. It's a complex task that's becoming more and more complex, and certainly a more professional industry than what people might have perceived a few years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And you talked about the last 3 years, but it would be great if you were to, say, paint a picture of where the waste and resource recovery industry was 10 years ago, and then where you think we are now.
Yeah, look, it's probably interesting to go back even further than that. I guess the start of the waste industry was all around sanitation and health. So, how do we avoid the health problems of waste piling up in streets, and it started to move towards sanitary landfills, sort of after the World War II. So people started to go, rather than just throw it out the back or leave it somewhere, we'll pull it into one place and we'll manage it safely as we can. And I guess over time, it's becoming more and more sophisticated in terms of not just delivering the safety elements, which are still, paramount and very important, but also trying to do smarter things with the materials we're picking up. So rather than just safely disposing it, it's going, well, do we have to dispose of that material, or is there something better we can do with it? Can we recover resources? Can we recover value? Can we get that back into the productive economy? So we've seen a big increase in the recycling sector. Most Australians, more than 90% of Australians now have access to a recycling system at the curbside. We're seeing that growth in the green bins as well. So for garden organics, and now increasingly inclusion of food into there, which is fantastic, but it just requires an extra level of sophistication in the processing. So where you can compost garden organics in an outdoor or open windrow, usually if you include food, you need to go to an enclosed, in-vessel composting system. So we're seeing an increased complexity and honestly an increased level of investment, an increased level of professionalism required of the people working in the sector as we move further and further up the resource recovery tree.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm from East Yorkshire. I don't know if you've ever had the sort of the joy of being to Yorkshire. It's a fantastic place, but we've got a local saying of where there's muck, there's brass. Which obviously
it is a big industry. It's $15 billion per annum turnover in the waste and resource recovery sector. When you put it side to side with some of the other industries that are much more high profile, it's a really important part of the economy. It's a very big employer, big generator of value for people.
Yeah, and I suppose that segues nicely, talking about the economy, into the idea about the circular economy and where waste and resource recovery might be going in the future. What would you? What's your vision of where we're going in the next 10 years?
Yeah, look, there's absolutely no doubt that the linear model, which I guess is what we've been used to, you take it out of the ground, you make it into something, you use it once, you throw it away. It just doesn't work. We don't have enough resources to keep doing that. In some material types, that's more obvious than others, but just fundamentally, it's a poor system. We can't afford socially, environmentally, or even economically to just keep using things once, throwing them away. And this isn't really a completely new concept. You look back to our grandparents' generation. A lot of those generation, were living the sort of ideals, not necessarily because they were idealistic, but they were living a lifestyle that was more akin to what we want to get back to. So, more reuse of materials, not just throwing things away, reducing packaging. If you can't avoid the packaging, then at least picking things that you can reuse or recycle. And just, fundamentally just trying to be smarter with the resources that we got. We can't keep wasting them. It's just a silly system. There is value in this material. Very few of these items have no higher value than just filling up a hole in the ground, and that's fundamentally what we do when we landfill something.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of these, we've seen in all the different areas that we work with in integrated infrastructure, there is people talk about the accelerated pace of change, and that COVID is driving that, whether that's through the use of Zoom and those things, or whether it's in the need to upskill people and drive new skills into the marketplace, or the way that offices might change. What are the COVID drivers behind sort of what waste, and I imagine they probably feed into political drivers as well for the industry. Yeah,
it's interesting. Waste is not regulated or treated as an essential service the way that power or water traditionally is viewed. But I tell you what, when you're in a disaster or a crisis, everyone remembers pretty quickly that it is a fundamental, absolute, essential part of safe functioning of the community. So, if people stop collecting those bins or the bins have got nowhere to go, it's a massive, massive impact on society. So, it's certainly these sort of moments of crisis, and frankly, we just rolled out of the bushfire season, which, again, you've got communities that have been absolutely devastated. One of the first fundamental tasks, you've got to get in there and you've got to get all the waste out of there so that people can, in a supermarket, it's lost power. You've got rotting material on the shelves. You've got to be able to get in there, clear it out before you can even start to resupply the community and make sure that they've got, new fresh produce. So it's a fundamental integrated part. People often don't think about the complexity of doing that. But I think these moments of crisis and COVID as well, just reminds us, we've got to keep the doors open. You've got to keep it moving. So, we absolutely have to keep our people safe so that they can stay out there and do what they need to do.
And what are the biggest challenges then to the industry in terms of moving towards that circular economy and hitting peak, recycling, peak reuse of the materials or products from waste?
Yeah, so look, that out of sight, out of mind attitude for a long time. We have a lot of NIMBYism, as you'd expect in the waste sector. Everyone wants good outcomes, but no one wants to live next to the facility that provides the outcomes. So it's very difficult in the infrastructure planning space. And frankly, we're not good in Australia at coordinating and planning the infrastructure. So it's kind of left to the private sector to do their best to pull things together. It's a real challenge. We look at some of our major cities, and the Melbourne recycling crisis certainly highlighted that last year, where a wobble in the market all of a sudden led to a mass event where half of the recyclables just had nowhere to go other than back to a hole in the ground. So that strategic planning around the infrastructure that we have, the contingency in the system, that's a real challenge for our sector. And I think bringing the community along and understanding some of the changes. You mentioned the energy from waste space. Yeah, we look internationally, and this is a well proven. There are literally hundreds, thousands of these facilities that operate safely in the heart of some of the world's major cities. In the middle of Paris, in the middle of Copenhagen. But in Australia, it's different. We haven't done it this way before, and there's a lot of people in the community that are nervous. They're saying, well, hang on, I've burnt waste in my backyard incinerator when I was a kid, and that used to smell. This is going to be terrible. And you're saying, well, this is a very, very different technology. But until people can see it and touch it and feel it, there is going to be that level of resistance and I guess fear. So, we have to develop that social license.
Well, there's a real misconception about what waste actually goes into the incinerator as well. It's non-recyclable waste, isn't it? It's not just any old waste.
Yeah, and look, and that's one of the fundamental misunderstandings, I think, is that the commercial drivers are very well aligned with the waste hierarchy. So we talk about a waste hierarchy where if you can avoid it, that's the best thing. Don't create it in the first place. If you can't avoid it, can you reuse it? If you can't reuse it, can you recycle it? Right at the bottom of that pyramid is dispose it. That's what you do when there's absolutely nothing else. If you can't recycle it and you can't, reuse that material to make something else from that same material, then recovering the energy value that's in it is a lot better than just throwing it in the hole in the ground where it does no one any good at all. So, but the commercial drivers are aligned. You would not be sending something to an energy from waste facility if it had a good market that you could recycle it. If you can sell it, pull it out and sell it to someone to make it into a new bottle, there's absolutely no way that you'd send it to an energy from waste facility where there's going to be a significant cost. These are hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. The gate fee to access one of these facilities is similar to a landfill. It's a much better outcome, but it's not trying to save costs, and it's not something that you would do with good recyclable material.
Is it arguably a case of social procurement as well, where we're not actually then sending our waste overseas and that's money actually exiting the country as well? Yeah,
that's one of the big changes in the recycling market. There's new global standards on what we can send. For a long time, China accepted pretty low quality material from around the world, including Australia, and that's changed. So now all of a sudden, Australian recyclers and recyclers everywhere are going, right, if we want to be able to get this material back to where it's being manufactured, we've got to have a higher quality. The higher quality means we've got to pull out more of that contamination, the non-target materials. What that means is that we've got more residual waste. It's ironic, but to do recycling better means that we will have more residual waste in Australia that's the non-recyclable fraction. And again, can we find something smarter than putting that into a hole in the ground? I think absolutely we can. It's got an energy value. Why wouldn't we use that to power people's homes?
Yeah, and the process of actually incinerating this waste, that doesn't, it's not like that just goes up in smoke. You're actually getting byproducts that you can use elsewhere at the end of the process as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, the main byproduct is the energy, but yeah, as you say, it's a very, very controlled process. It's not a backyard bonfire where you just throw things on and see how it goes. It's very controlled firing conditions, a huge amount of effort into the cleaning up the flue gases so that the emissions from the plants are absolutely negligible. In terms of other byproducts, if you look internationally, you talked about the UK before. Ash is one of the byproducts of energy from waste. You look globally, and there's lots of people that are doing interesting things in terms of reusing that ash as an aggregate material, using it in road base and those sort of things. That's an obvious opportunity in Australia. It probably takes a while, but as it always does. We've been having this conversation for decades around glass that's surplus to the bottle-to-bottle markets, and converting that to sand instead of going and mining a riverbank or a beach, using that as a recycled product. But it takes a long time to change people's mindset and opinions and prove that a recycled product is better, or at least just as good as a virgin product.
Yeah, that's really interesting, is it? Because I was on the seminar with the two guys from Downer, and they were talking about the fact that they were fighting a battle to change the perception that actually that glass that you get from bottles, or the sand that you get from glass is of a higher quality than the sand that you get out of riverbed anyway. And also the something I didn't realise, which I thought was fantastic, is those bins that you see outside the supermarkets that are collecting those specific types of plastic bottles. That's actually going to tarmac and or bitumen, whatever the technical term is, but it's creating a better quality product in terms of the roads that we drive on as well. Yeah,
that's right. So that product, and I don't know what percentage of soft plastics goes into that. It goes into lots of different types of products, but yeah, in the road space, the Downer work on Reconifelt, it's a higher performing product. It lasts longer. It's a fantastic example of how we can use recovered resources to make better products and solve another problem. You got to put a plasticizer in there somehow. Why not use it from a recycled content?
That's great. So what are the biggest opportunities for the industry right now? What are the sort of big ticket items that you're looking at?
Yeah, so look, the challenges always create the opportunities, but this whole global restructure on the recycling front, it's something that's played out in a negative sense over the last couple of years in Australia. I think, going the next few years ahead, we're going to see the positive side of that. So, we've seen the federal government get involved in this space like they've never done in the past. They've recently announced significant funding and a level of interest in improving the domestic resource recovery space. So I think we're going to see a lot of investment. I think we're going to see a lot of jobs, and that's one of the things that it's going to be a struggle to keep pace with the level of growth and professionalisation of our sector, is to be able to pull in new skills, new people. We are a fast-growing part of the economy, and no doubt there's a big challenge in there as to how do we keep up with the skills and make sure we've got the right people as we go and invest more, build more complex facilities, and do more, create more value in Australia.
I think that's key. I was on a call last night where that came up again. It's skills and talent and training, and how do we move people from industries such as aviation or car manufacturing and reskill those people. I'm worried that there is an education or a reskilling gap between industry and where I think government could have some influence. And actually, there's a lot of money going into stuff like TAFE at the moment, but I don't necessarily know if it's going into the right areas and training people into the industries that are going to need it down the line, or whether it's more of a knee-jerk sort of COVID, let's get people into TAFE sort of thing. But I guess we'll see further down the line.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt there's increasing opportunities, and we will fill those gaps somehow. I guess the question is how orderly, how planned is that versus how much you have to scramble. And in the past, we've relied a lot on international skills. We've got a lot of We bring out a lot of people who've been there, done that in Europe or the UK, which is fantastic. Again, we're not really, doing anything that's never been done before. We're just making sure we Australianise it, do it in a way that makes sense in this country. So there's a lot of international skills that we can draw on, but we've got to develop our own local pool as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we are a short form podcast, and I know that you're a very busy man and very much appreciate your time today. But with fear of slightly repeating ourselves, because we talked about so many great opportunities for the industry. But what are you most excited about now?
Look, I'm really excited about the fact that people care. We've really seen a fundamental shift, and I think it's a sustained shift. I think that recycling and waste issues have become on the radar like never before in the last few years. I think there's a level of interest. I think people want to know that we're managing their materials responsibly. They want to know that this stuff is going to a higher purpose. They want to know that when they whirl their bins out, they can trust that the best possible outcomes are occurring. So I think we've crossed that threshold. We're no longer a secret, dirty, behind-the-scenes industry. We're front and centre in the psyche, and I think that's going to drive some real change. You wouldn't want to be the councillor who signs up for a dodgy service now that you know that your community actually really does care, and they're just not going to accept poor outcomes in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Well, look, thank you ever so much again for your time. Best of luck with Mount Piper and the work that you've got to do there. And thank you again for coming on the podcast, and have a great day. Brilliant. Thanks, Garth. Great talking to you. Cheers. Integrated Infrastructure is powered by North Search, specialists in executive and technical search across engineering, design, construction, property and energy markets in Australia. If you'd like to find out more about North Search or get involved with this podcast, you can click on the links in the show notes or email me directly at the address on the screen. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Integrated Infrastructure. Please tell your friends and colleagues if you did, and we hope to see you again soon.